Maths, in this video we're going to have a look at indices. And before we get into the questions, we're going to just have a look at these tables. And what these tables shows is some of the square numbers, cube root numbers and numbers to the power of 4. And it's just very useful if you know these examples shown here, and it will make this topic a lot easier and a lot faster when you're answering questions. And what we mean by square number is when you multiply a number by itself. So from the table you'll be able to see like something like 11 times 11 is 121. A cube number is when you multiply a number by itself 3 times. So like 4 times 4 times 4 would be 64. And power of the 4 is when you multiply a number by itself 4 times. So 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 would be 81. And it's also makes it easier when you go backwards, for example, when you're doing square roots and cube roots and 4 roots. So it is a good idea just to learn those. It will help you a lot when answering questions on this topic. Question 1. What you'll notice is these questions are non-calculator because these are the types of questions that they will expect you to be able to work out on a non-calculator paper. And part A is 3 cubed, which is 3 times 3 times 3. Now, if you think back to the tables, 3 times 3 times 3 would be 27. So if you know your indices well, then you'll know that off the top of your head. Otherwise, what you'll do is you'll do 3 times 3, which is 9. And then if you times it by 3 again, you will get 27. Now, part B is the cube root of 8. And what we need to think about here is what number multiplies together 3 times to get 8. And again, back to the tables, that would be 2 if you know your indices well. If you didn't know your indices well, you'd sort of be able to work it out because it's 8, it's going to be a really small number. And 2 times 2 is 4, times by 2 again is 8. For part C, we've got, in brackets, root 4 squared. So what this means is we've got root 4 times by the square root of 4. And we know the square root of 4 is 2, so it's 2 times 2, which is 4. And we notice that the 4 is what we started with. And the reason it's the same as what we started with is because when you square root a number and then you square it, square rooting and squaring are the opposite of each other. So all you're going to end up with is the number you started with, which in this case was 4. So when we look at the next question, part D, which is root 8 multiplied by root 8, well, the answer is going to be 8. Because if you square root 8 and then square it, we know that's the opposite. So you're going to end up with what you started with. We don't need to know what the square root of 8 is, which will be a decimal. We just need to, because we know square root and squaring are the opposite. Hope that makes sense. Now for the next one, we're just doing some indices work here, and we can see the questions asked us to express it in the form of 2 to the power of n. So we want to leave it as 2 to the power of something, and the first one is 2 to the power of 5 times 2 to the power of 3. Now, when you multiply indices, you actually add the indices because what 2 to the power of 5 means is you times in 2 together by itself 5 times. And then 2 cubed means you times in 2 by itself another 3 times. So if you want to have the total number of times that you're going to multiply 2 by itself, you need to add the 5 and the 3, the indices. And that'll get us 2 to the power of 8. Now, for this one, the next one, it's just 3 terms. And you just do exactly the same thing. We've got 2 to the power, and then we've got 3, 4, and 2. So if we add them together, we get 2 to the power of 9. Now, the next one is division. And when you divide by 2, it's the opposite of multiplying by 2, isn't it? So the number of times we're going to divide by 2, we've got 2 to the power of 5, and because it's the opposite of multiplying, we're going to get these indices cancelling each other out. And the way to work out how much it cancels out by is we're going to take away the indices. So 2 to the power of 9 divided by 2 to the power of 5. We do 9 take away 5, which leaves us with 2 to the power of 4. And for the last one, we've got a fraction. Now, fractions work as it's the top divided by the bottom. So it's actually just a bit like this question here. You're just going to treat it exactly the same way. We're going to have 2 to the power of 12 divided by 2 cubed. We subtract the indices from each other, and that leaves us with 2 to the power of 9. Right, so question 3. Again, this question is another one where we have to express in the form, well, this time it's 3 to the power of n instead of 2 to the power of n. And what we've got is we've got some, you can see we've got some numbers like 9 and 81. So in some ways we are working backwards. With the first one though, we've got 3 cubed in brackets squared. So what that means is if it's in brackets, it's going to be 3 cubed times 3 cubed. And if you remember, we add indices, so that's 3 to the power of 6. Another way you can work out this question, rather than just writing it out like this, because sometimes it won't be something as easy as squared, is you can, when it's in brackets and got a power outside, you can actually multiply the powers. And if you think about it, 3 times 2 is 6, so you would get exactly the same answer, because sometimes with harder ones, as I say, you will need to do that. Now, for the next one, we've got 9, but we need to express it in the form 3 to the power of n. So we need to think 3 to the power of what is going to equal 9. And if you think back to those tables, it was actually 3 squared, because 3 times 3 is equal to 9. So the answer for this one would be 3 squared. And then we've got 81. And we know if we do 3 times 3 times 3, 3 times, that gives us 27. And then if we multiply it by 3 again, and what you do is if you didn't know this off the top of your head, what you do is you just do a normal method, your normal method that you usually use for long multiplication. And what the answer you get would be 81 if you times 27 by 3 again. I'm not going to go through that in this video, but because there are a few different methods that people may use. It's just best to use the method of long multiplication that you used to using. Anyway, so that's what you'd find is it's 3 to the power of 4. If you multiply 3 together 4 times, you get 81. And question 4. So this is a few trickier ones. So in part A, we've got root 5 in brackets squared. And if you remember back to the first question in part C and D, when we multiply a root and when we multiply root 5 times root 5, you square root in 5, but then you square it. And that means you're going to end up with the same thing as what's been square rooted, which is 5. So for this first question, part A, we'd have 5 times by, and it's the same with the root 3. Root 3 times root 3 would be 3. So it's 5 times 3, and that's equal to 15. And part B. So part B, you can see there's some brackets involved, and if you think back to bid maths, you always work out the brackets before anything else. And in the first bracket, we've got 4 to the power of 15 divided by 4 to the power of 9. Well, we've already done when you divide powers, you subtract them. So 4 to the power of 15 divided by 4 to the power of 9, that's going to be 15 take away 9. It's going to leave us with 4 to the power of 6. And we're going to divide it by, well, we've got 4 to the power of 3 times 4. Now, when there's actually no power there, and it's just like a number, it's actually just to the power of 1. So you just have to imagine that it's like, there's a 1 there as a power. So when we add the indices together, 4 cubed times by 4 is 4 to the power of 4 because you're timesing the 4 an extra time. And as we said before, when you divide powers, you subtract. So 4 to the 6 divided by 4 to the power of 4 will leave us with 4 squared. And you can write that as 16 because this question just says work out the value. It doesn't ask you to write it as a power. Right, thank you for watching. Hope you found that video helpful. If you want to see more videos, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. If you'd like some practice questions, please visit www.mitchellmathsandscience.com where you'll find worksheets on this topic. Thank you.